You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started. Optix has built a platform for SQL-powered security analytics. Extending the OS query agent, Optix collects, aggregates, and analyzes a wide range of system data and makes that available to solve multiple security challenges. Their solution provides visibility across Linux, macOS, Windows, containers, and cloud workloads. Their customers are using the Optix platform for fleet visibility, intrusion detection, investigation, and audit and compliance. Visit securityweekly.com/Optix and be one of the first to see how they've mapped over 500 behavioral rules to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join Amit Barakat, co-founder and CEO of Perimeter 81, and myself for a technical deep dive into the problems inherent in legacy VPN technology. Together, we will explore solutions for the modern workforce, how momentum toward a perimeterless architecture is helping redefine the future of cybersecurity. You can register now at securityweekly.com/Perimeter81. Security Weekly, of course, in partnership with the Cyber Risk Alliance, is excited to present Security Weekly Unlocked on December 10th, 2020. The inaugural edition of Security Weekly Unlocked also celebrates Security Weekly's 15-year anniversary and will feature talks from Ron and Cindy Gula, Kevin Finisterre, Vivek Ramachandran, and so much more. The agenda is live. You can go to securityweekly.com/unlocked and register for this completely free event. Recently, I've done some trivia questions for the event that will run during the virtual conference. The first round of trivia questions that I did, and I don't know if this will end up being the final version, but are based on Security Weekly history and Security Weekly trivia game. So if you listen to all 1,000 episodes or whatever that we produced, you got a good chance of getting 100 on the trivia. And we've got challenge coins as prizes.
And over 400 registered and still going.
Oh, wonderful.
419, I think, this morning was the number.
Yeah. Nice. Good stuff. Hey, lots of news to talk about this week. I want to start with JumpCloud because that literally jumped out at me because we did a briefing with JumpCloud. And I'd have to tell you, man, I was impressed. I thought their senior leadership was very articulate in understanding the challenges that are faced today from a directory service and have a great design. They didn't like bat an eye or do any hand waving when I asked them the security questions. They were very, very in tune with that, which I was impressed with. And it's interesting. I think I had not positioned them as really going after Active Directory market share, but they just got $75 million in funding, and some of their advertising that I see out there in their marketing is totally going after Active Directory, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that because we got that briefing from their senior leadership, and I was like, this is cool. This is cool.
It's funny. After the news broke, I got some phone calls from a few friends in the industry going, "Hey, what do you know about JumpCloud?" I'm like, well, funny enough, Paul and I did a briefing with them because they have caught the eye of a few people, because now what you've got is this alternative as a directory to Active Directory and Azure AD that is built more around kind of a more hybrid approach, right? You've got Windows, Mac, Linux, all different types of desktops and stuff that connects in. And you see this move to the cloud. So they've caught the eye of a few, just to put it out there, right? And I think it's interesting, Paul, is they weren't really positioning themselves against AD, but they are like the AD alternative right now.
But, it's interesting. And I've had this conversation with a few different vendors specifically, and that is the cross-platform nature of the enterprise today, I believe could be changing. I think it's still heavy Windows. Look, I mean, let's be frank. But I think that with the advent of cloud and your cloud resources, you may not even have an operating system to speak of in the cloud. You may just be running it natively in the cloud. And you've got this mixture, I think, of Mac, Linux, Windows, and maybe even Chromebooks, which is I would put in a separate category. Even though it's based on Linux, I still put that in a separate category. And I think it's interesting as we move forward, enterprises and businesses today shouldn't be limited by the platforms that they choose. You should have technologies for management and security that go across all these platforms. And especially the newer vendors in the space are really in tune with, look, we're going after the folks that aren't just a Windows shop. And I think that's important. You look at Microsoft embracing operating systems such as Linux. And we're off, Microsoft 365. I run Linux. I don't have any issues. And I think that's really telling of where the future might bring. I think it's exciting for businesses, but challenging for security if you don't have these vendors that support multiple platforms.
Yeah, true.
And
I think
JumpCloud is super interesting because they started out as a security tool and kind of pivoted into more of the, IT Swiss Army knife, kind of messaging that they have now. And starting off, they're more like a chef or a puppet. If I recall correctly, back in the day, they were doing server automation and stuff like that, and they actually kept all that in the product and added the directory pieces to it. And so you can do things like, say, run this command across all my Windows endpoints and compile the results for me. They make it super easy to do stuff like that. So it's almost like a MDM, EMM product as well. Like you can do full endpoint management with it.
And we didn't talk about Kerberos, which I think is, in my opinion, encouraging for security. Because I think, one, it's complicated, and two, in Active Directory, it's the source of certain vulnerabilities, and not even vulnerabilities, but just misconfiguration and abusing how it's set up. Yeah,
JumpCloud doesn't have all that legacy to deal with.
Exactly. Let's go through funding announcements while we're on it. We got a lot of news articles to cover. Funding and acquisitions. What else you got, Matt, in your stories?
So there's some interesting ones, right? Darktrace is looking to file a $5 billion IPO on the London Stock Exchange. We've been waiting for kind of the Darktrace, Tanium. There's a few of them that have been kind of under the covers for a while. They're out shopping. They're projecting right now a $5 billion IPO. I thought that was a very interesting piece of news that came out of the UK.
So their valuation is $5 billion right now?
Well, that's their target for the valuation after they go IPO. So typically it's not that high, but what they're trying to get is a bump to that $5 billion valuation. Now, remember when Tenable came out in IPO, we were a little over $1 billion. Maybe $2 billion. Maybe we got to a $2 billion valuation. So this will be 2.5 times the size of the Tenable IPO.
Is that market cap or valuation? They're different.
Yeah, it's valuation. Yeah,
because market cap is different.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's their capitalization based on their current stock price and the number of outstanding shares. So that's kind of the target.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It depends on how much money you're looking to raise, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. And where they set the price and how many shares come out. But this one is moving. So this is a very interesting one to watch.
You think it's still going to have some problems with its its history, with the HP autonomy folks being attached to it? I mean, they've all disconnected from it years ago, but I in almost every story I see about it, there's still concerns about that.
I don't know. I mean, what I could not find, and I'll look for it, is kind of what's their revenue rate? Where are they as a business, right? To get a $5 billion market cap valuation, you got to look at where they are from a revenue perspective, growth perspective. I didn't see any of that data yet because I don't know if they've officially filed, but they're out shopping. That is more of a tell to me than some of the historical stuff. I mean, look, Tanium's had some issues with management changeovers and all the things they've gone through. At some point, they're going to go public. Are people going to hold them to that when they go? I don't know, Adrian. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. There was a couple other funding announcements in here. Enso Security raises $6 million for AppSec management. This was a little interesting. They talk about software posture or application posture management or something like that. There's this whole new class of posture management coming out of Gartner, which I want everybody to stop and just wait a second. Okay. So it started with CSPM, right? You had cloud security posture management, and we saw us go through the evolution of that space with Redlock, Evident.io, Cloud Needy, et cetera. Now there's this new posture management around SaaS-based applications. Now, this is another company coming into the application software side, posture management side. And when I start reading it, I'm like, well, it sounds like a lot of what Accurix is doing. So where's this cross between understanding aspects of software security as part of configuration code, et cetera, all the way through to the runtime side of how this stuff is configured in production? There's this interesting market starting to emerge. Gartner calls it posture management, but you're seeing some new startups pop up in this space, so it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think it looks like they're going after the heart of the issue there, which is fixing security problems during the development process. Which is tough because you got to understand it, you got to plug into it, you got to be as invisible as possible. But it's interesting seeing it's.
Yeah, and there's a lot of vendors already doing aspects of this. I mean, what GitLab's doing as part of the CI/CD pipeline, what Accurix is doing looking at code. I mean, there are already vendors playing in this space, and now you get this company that's kind of a hybrid of that with what we would traditionally call cloud security posture management.
And it's interesting. Weil Ventures is one of the investors backing it, and they've got a pretty good track record. Like they haven't gone after anything that's been like Tanium huge or anything like that, but almost everything that they've backed has done really well. Less VC well than just like a really, really solid results. So I always perk up when I see them back somebody because they've got a good track record.
Interesting.
I thought the SentinelOne raise was interesting.
Oh yeah, huge.
267 million in funding. Their valuation is now over $3 billion.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they took 200 million right before RSA conference earlier this year. Here's another $267 million raise. Now there's some discussion about the exact number, but still, it's a huge number, huge valuation. Everybody's going after the endpoint space. But Adrian, I'm curious. I'm gonna set this up for you, but I'm curious on your thoughts. I mean, look, we saw Carbon Black come out. We saw CrowdStrike come out. CrowdStrike's done really well. Carbon Black gets acquired by VMware. So we really only have kind of like one public pure play EDR. What do you see with the rest of the EDR? What's the exit? SentinelOne has to go public, don't they? The valuation's too big to do anything else.
Yeah. I mean, well, so the options now, private equity is an option as well. If they don't want to IPO, and they miss the acquisition, if IBM or, I'm trying to think who else would be interested in snapping up, somebody in the billions at this point. Like that really narrows down the acquirer pool. You're looking at private equity. Private equity will pick it up, combine it with a few other companies, flip it, maybe bring it to IPO as some conglomeration of SentinelOne plus a few other things. So and that really not a whole lot of options for them.
Right, and that leaves one player in the space, is Thoma Bravo, who just closed a multi-billion-dollar fund to go do this because they own a bunch of security products. They've got Logarithm and Perva and a few of these other guys. You bring in somebody like a SentinelOne, you kind of pull a couple of these things together, your scenario could play out. But I think Thoma Bravo is the only one in a position to potentially do that.
Yeah, and this has got to be like a Series E or something like that. It looks like they've nearly $500 million is what they've raised so far. So they, with raises this large, you always wonder, if it's a partial buyout of the original investors, founders, stuff like that. Yeah, it's a Series E. It looks like. So it's people see that and they think, all that's going to sales and marketing or something like that. And, often that's not the case. If there's a buyout of earlier investors in there, they're recapitalizing or something like that.
Yeah. Couple acquisitions, Paul, we should hit. Neustar agrees to buy Verisign's public DNS. Now, this is on the heels of, I think Neustar already bought a bunch of Verisign security products.
Yeah,
Remember,
I was going to say they bought other Verisign stuff before.
Yeah, this happened like a year and a half ago. Verisign sold a bunch of stuff to Neustar, but they kept certain pieces. And this is one of the pieces they kept. They kept their DNS service. Well, now they just sold the DNS service to Verisign. Probably because Verisign realized that without the rest of the security portfolio, what were they going to do with the DNS service is my guess. But
yeah. And Neustar already had a really strong DNS service. They were like the DNS people. What was the malware that ran around? There was, I can't remember it. It was in one of the books I read. Famous malware that ran around, and the Neustar folks were involved in a huge part of the story in tracing back the DNS. What was that? Now I can't. People are probably yelling in their cars and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Ping Identity does another acquisition, Symphonic software, to add policy-driven authorization. This is on the heels of their previous acquisition they just did with who was that? I'm trying to remember. They just did another acquisition a couple months back. So, Ping's doing some interesting acquisitions to broaden out their identity play here. I like Ping. I like SailPoint. I like these guys in the space. Again, it's part of my triad, app user data. So, here's some improvements in additional capabilities in the identity space.
I thought it was interesting. PKWARE acquires Dataguise. Those you may remember PKZip. I actually did an impromptu briefing with PKWARE at a conference a few years ago. And I thought it was interesting that they were still a player in the data security space. They kind of pivoted from that original PKWARE stuff and brought it to an enterprise class. This acquisition really kind of pushes them further, I think, into enterprise data protection. Dataguise is an innovative technology for businesses to discover and protect personal data stored across diverse IT systems and environments. So good acquisition, it sounds like, for PKWARE.
Yeah, and there are some data-themed announcements in here. I mean, you've got Palo Alto with their DLP offering back to discovery and classification. We're actually going to do
DLP is all the rage all of a sudden. Everyone's talking about DLP that's not DLP. And look, Secure Circle is a sponsor.
It's because it's the hardest problem. You know, like you see these hard problems, like NAC and DLP, like they come in, they're terrible. People get buried in alerts and stuff like that, or it's a management nightmare and they go away. And because they're important, eventually somebody picks it up again and says, well, I guess we got to take another shot at this.
Yeah, and to your point, Paul, right? Secure Circle is a sponsor. We're actually going to do a webcast with them on Zero Trust DLP, which is kind of flipping the model. But when you read this Palo Alto press release, you're just like, that's the old DLP. There's nothing new here. It's like, really? We've struggled so much with trying to discover and classify data to try to put some protections around it. But that's exactly what the press release says they just released.
And I mean, that's why Matt and I like Secure Circle, because they flip the DLP model on its head, like Matt said. And they're like, and you see it in some of the titles of their webcast, they're like, discovery and classification is not the right approach.
It totally grabbed my attention. I saw that headline, forget about classifying and stuff like that. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, and it's legit. Matt and I have done several briefings and had demos, multiple demos from Secure Circle, and their stuff. Again, they're a sponsor, but they're a sponsor because their stuff is legit. Is what we found. So,
yeah, and I mean, so you've got all these people going after the data layer again. Finally, hallelujah. I mean, it's what we've been trying to protect for 30 plus years, right? But just the way people are going after it, it seems like this. We're just taking old traditional stuff, kind of throwing a respin on it and shove it back out the door. It's not there, right? And so like, there's a couple of them in here that we flagged.
A lot of other providers have
unleashed janky regex on your data lakes.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And there's so many other providers. Great point, Adrian, that are adding DLP as a feature. And I don't believe I think the features are not implemented correctly. I think you need a more encompassing solution that addresses those issues of protecting your data.
Yep. There was, we missed, I think, one acquisition. Barracuda acquires Fyde. Now, this one's interesting because, Barracuda goes after the small to medium businesses. Everybody hears their ads all over the radio and stuff. But this is an interesting pivot for them because this gives them some cloud capabilities. I mean, as you think about the kind of the appliance-based on-prem kind of stuff they traditionally have done, COVID and the shift to remote work has forced them to make some acquisitions to give them some capabilities over on the other side. I mean, obviously this makes sense for them. They're going to have to do something to stay relevant in a remote worker world. This is an acquisition. I don't know how good it is. It talks about their zero trust approach around continuous authentication of all users. So I'm not quite sure what that means yet.
So I'm pretty sure this is a zero trust play where, what you have access to, it's kind of the classic, instead of VPNing to a subnet or something like that, you're granted access to applications and resources. And based on your authentication, it handles all the VPN tunnels and stuff like that behind the scenes.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's an interesting one. Fyde was fairly early stage, I think. I know the founder there, and I've played with the tool, and I've had a few briefings from him, and it's it's a pretty neat tool. It's and it's interesting because there's some fine lines between some more traditional VPN approaches and some of these zero trust approaches, which it's all predicated on the same stuff, like reducing the attack surface. Now your internal app doesn't need to be on the public internet. Somebody just runs this agent on their system and they magically get access to it. They plug in the domain and they get there. And, you don't have, billions of folks banging away at the WAF all day.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I want to see out of these solutions is scale, right? The one thing I've noticed about some of these solutions, and I think we are starting to see some innovation here, is they're just reverse proxies, right? And it's like, I still have this bandwidth like bottleneck in the model, right? How do you allow the internet to connect to the internet without shoving it through the straw, as I would say back in the day, right? And so are these guys really innovating in a highly distributed, scalable way to provide that zero trust access? That's great. But if it's just another reverse proxy that creates another bottleneck in the internet, I'm not sure these solutions survive.
I'm just stuck on, I don't want to work, I just want to bang on the WAF all day. I don't know why that was a great quote snippet.
It's I've actually seen I forget the name of the startup now, but their whole pitch was doing something similar, using VPN technology, using IPsec tunnels and stuff like that to actually reduce that bottleneck. Saying, hey, typically, the trace route between you and your work resources are something like 26 hops. By putting our POPs, on level 3, close to backbone providers, we can actually reduce the latency and reduce the number of hops, from, worker to business. And things like that. So I think that's, done right. Maybe there's an opportunity to actually alleviate, some bottlenecks, by using technology like this. But for Barracuda, primarily SME, right? So maybe they're not that worried about scale.
Maybe not. Yeah, that could be true, right? When you're dealing with sub 500 employee companies, right? Maybe you don't have to worry about the scale.
Yeah.
Kasada, I should say. Kasada is a cigar brand. Kasada, with a K, is a bot detection company that announced a new feature of their products, or new product line that covers your API endpoints and detects bot fraud and targeted attacks, automated attacks against your APIs, which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure where in the competitive landscape that puts them with the other players in this space that are doing bot detection. Google's got a great product for that, and many others. There's been a lot of consolidation too. Imperva bought someone. There's a whole story with bot detection that's out there. But interesting, they're covering the APIs.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I'm going to say, how does this compare to what Google's doing? How is this comparing to what some of the other folks are doing around API protections? Right, there's some API security specific solutions that are out there.
That too, yeah, which probably has bot detection built into some of those platforms as well. So take all that in consideration when you're shopping for an API security solution, making sure it includes bot detection, or if you're in bot detection, make sure you have that coverage for your APIs, because most of your API, if you've got a modern web application, you've got an API exposed to the internet, and that should
probably
be protected. Yeah,
multiple APIs exposed to the internet.
Yep. Hopefully, all the ones you intended.
It's interesting. Like when you dig into some of these, some of these that look like they're competing with each other actually aren't, and they're going after different niches and things like that. Like, are you trying to prevent scraping? Are you trying to prevent, coin miners from injecting themselves? Like there's, then the API piece, denial of service, that kind of stuff. Like you really have to dig into some of these vendors I've found to figure out if they're even competing with one another or if they're complementary.
It's a great point.
Yes, it is. And again, kind of back to the posture management discussion, right? You're going to see variations of this. We're seeing the same thing in bot, right? We're seeing variations of this. So, at some point, somebody has to put together a set of criteria to evaluate some of these vendors and markets against, and maybe we'll know who's doing what and who's competing with who. Just saying.
I'm managing my posture right now at my standing desk.
That's it.
There you go. This Logarithm has this announcement with Cisco endpoint, secure endpoint. So I thought this was interesting because it goes back a little bit to the conversation we were having with Chronicle in the first segment, right? This whole concept of sensor and brain, right? You've got Logarithm, the Cisco endpoint, they're doing malware detection, right? It's a similar concept, and I'm seeing more of these interesting endpoint and kind of traditional SIEM partnerships, right? And I'm curious how this plays out in the long run, because who's going to be the brain in some of these areas, right? Are we going to see the CrowdStrikes of the world in the EDR space continue to be just an endpoint brain or more? How do we see these SIMs and these security analytics tools continue to play that brain space, and are they just going to absorb a bunch of data from different sensors? We're seeing the same thing in network detection and response, right? There's aspects of that sensor brain discussion. These are just interesting announcements, but I'm waiting to see how, and I brought this up on the Extra Hop interview last week, Paul, about this. What happens with EDR, NDR, TDR? How does it all come together in this there's this concept of XDR, and there's lots of definitions for it, but how does this stuff all come together in a cohesive way long term? It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, if you break down the model, I think you have to make some choices there. Like, are you going to be a sensor, or are you going to be, like you say, the brain? I think of that being the SOAR piece of it. That you build out that if this then that scenario, and then you have the piece that actually takes action. Eventually when that brain makes the decision, are we taking that endpoint off the network? Are we blocking an IP? Like what's the actual enforcement? And I'm not sure if there's space for a whole bunch of brains, or if you want to just standardize on one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why I'm curious to see how this plays out a little bit, because you're starting to see some of this a little bit between the EDRs and the security analytics SIM SOAR vendors. Does it go further than that?
Everybody's got a little SOAR now, right? Like, doesn't CrowdStrike have some SOAR? And I think
it's a feature now.
Logarithm actually had that quite a while ago, and they haven't leaned on it as much, until Gartner, gave an acronym and a name to it. But yeah, it seems like everybody's throwing a little rules engine in there where you can automate things and integrate things.
I thought the announcement from cPacket was interesting. I thought of cPacket as a company that gives you really high performance network packet capture capabilities, but rightfully so, they've also pivoted into the cloud with this NDR space that Gartner has lovingly defined for us in network detection and response, and doing that in the cloud in conjunction with Amazon's AWS gateway load balancing to be able to, it sounds like, collect your network packets from the cloud, which is just, I can't tell how important it is today. I forget who we were interviewing, Extra Hop, I think. I don't know if we've done it yet or if it was a prep call now that I think of it, right? But that is super, super important that because you don't have control over the network anymore. And I don't think you're going to, probably never again. I mean, maybe in certain circumstances, but there's always going to be those people working from home and working remotely. There was before, which was interesting. There might be more now, but I think it underscores the challenge that we have of where do we collect that network telemetry now? The right place to do that is up in the cloud, and thankfully we've got multiple solutions to choose from in that arena. And cPacket has entered that space. Interesting. This is sounds like a newer feature of AWS.
It is. I mean, I think how Extra Hop and some of these guys got in early is the relationship with AWS, and it looks like AWS has continued to open up some of those capabilities to provide this to other vendors, cPacket now being another vendor in this space. But it requires some very interesting configurations, I think, to make this work because of the way you have to grab those packets from the cloud provider, in this case, AWS.
There was another AWS story. There was another bot story. BotRx widgets provide analytical content and how attacks.
Yeah, there's Radware.
Radware, thank you.
Virtual DDoS protection in AWS.
Yes. Not sure how they're doing that. Radware's product line, quite frankly, tends to confuse me a bit as to exactly what they're after, but it sounds like they're also pivoting into protection in the cloud.
Yeah, I think Radware does pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go to their website, it's like they do everything. I don't know how good any of the individual products are. You know, we track them in the Security Weekly 25 Index because they are a public company. But when you look at their website, it's like,
they
do
gamut.
everything.
Yeah, they cover the gamut. They heavily focused on cloud in their messaging. Again, not sure how they're. I mean, obviously, there are people using them and having success, right? They are a successful company, I would say, in the stock index, Matt. When we cover them, I don't remember their name coming up specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they do okay. I mean, they've missed a couple times. You know, when you look at the performance, they've shown up on the underperform a couple times, but they've also had some really good analyst ratings because their stock price was suppressed. So, you know, every quarter we track that. So, well, you'll have to listen the next time I mention Radware in that segment.
Yeah, so it looks like they've got a virtual appliance that you deploy, probably EC2, you know, that integrates with AWS Gateway Load Balancer, which to me says, you know, launches, you know, this virtual appliance and put it in line with the AWS Gateway.
Which I think is that's a different kind of approach than I think some of the other ones are doing, though. I'm curious how this scales compared to some of the other solutions on the market. This seems like the more traditional way to do it, Adrian. Like, just spin up a virtual appliance and put me in line, and I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very traditional. It's, you know, pre-cloud days, but in AWS, and it says it infinitely scales. So I guess they're scaling horizontally there.
Yeah, you just spin up another EC2 instance, drop in another virtual appliance, and it scales.
Another extra large, like what am I? And so that's the interesting thing there is, you know, what am I paying them versus what am I paying in AWS costs there? And again, that scale question comes into play. Like, how far do I scale to where, you know, it's probably cheaper for me to use an off-prem, you know, DDoS mitigation model, like something from Cloudflare or Akamai.
Or NetScout or whoever, right? I mean, there's other solutions out there, yeah.
Yep.
There was a couple of other bot stories. White Ops is offering expanded protection against bot attacks, and they're announcing their availability in the AWS Marketplace, which is just a solutions kind of deployment model. I was not familiar with White Ops in that space. And BotRx announced customizable business risk extensions that also are in the contextualizing the impact of bot and manual attacks Kind of, I don't know if you guys saw either of these stories.
I don't know what that means, but I saw it.
Right? It sounds good. Sounds provocative. Yeah, I'm not familiar with either of those companies, but that's 3 articles this week on bot detection. So interesting. We hadn't talked about
so
it
I
in a
know
while.
of White Ops because that's where Dan Kaminsky was for a while. I'm not sure if he's still there.
Gotcha. Cool. Any other
Mr.
stories?
DNS.
No, gosh, we beat him up to death.
A lot of stories. Awesome.
A lot.
Well, stay tuned. Thank you both. And stay tuned for pre-recorded interviews with Jeff Capone of Secure Circle and Roy Cohen of Vicarious coming up next.